Thank you very much, Dr. Bashir, for this very illuminating paper. We'll now move on to the second speaker, the panelists. I would like to introduce Dr. Hadiza Kere Abdulrahman. Dr. Hadiza Kere Abdulrahman is a lecturer in inclusive education at Bishop Gloucester's University in Lincoln, United Kingdom. She has a PhD in education, and she researches the Almajiranci system of education. She is particularly interested in Nigeria and all that concerns her. And though she might have left Nigeria for over 20 years, I'm told, Nigeria flows in her veins all the time. And she remains deeply invested in this country. Like many Nigerians in diaspora, she takes all her time thinking deeply about the opportunities and challenges confronting this great country. And all her educational pursuits are geared towards finding ways of meeting the country's needs. Along with her younger sister, she owns a school in Mina, Niger State. Her family is also involved in several other projects that allow her to remain very hopeful about Nigeria's future prospects. May I therefore formally introduce to you Dr. Hadiza, who will present a researcher's perspective, providing context for this discussion. Dr. Abdulrahman, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. All protocols observed. I send my warmest regards to everyone on the panel, and I send my warmest regards to everyone who's joined us this morning. I know it can't be easy. I'm really honored to be on this panel, actually, and I thank the organizers for coming up with an extensive panel such as this. I think every perspective has been covered. I've been asked to share my research, and I feel like whenever I talk about Almajiranci, I need to go back and revisit. And even the things that we take for granted, assuming everyone knows what it is, we need to just go back and remind people of what it is. And the reason for this is Almajiranci is often conflated with begging. So because we see many boys on the streets of northern Nigeria who beg, we think that is Almajiranci. Almajiri has become a byword or another word for beggar. So I think in working towards a solution, we need to be able to take apart the two issues. Almajiranci as an education system, Almajiranci as a social issue. So that's one of the things I wanted to clarify. One of the things that attracted me to this area, like everyone else, was the boys on the streets. Every time I went home to Nigeria, I would see more boys on the streets. So when the opportunity arose for me to do a PhD, I knew that I had to study Almajiranci. And I started reading all the research out there, and one thing struck me. And what struck me was the sameness of the research. Every single research, bar a few that I look at Almajiranci from a place of dysfunctionality, using a negative lens. That is what has come to be the constituted knowledge of Almajiranci, this problematic system that has nothing good in it. Now, the researcher in me thought, that's a bit strange. We all know an Almajiri or two. We all know one former Almajiri or another. And contrary to what this research or literature tells us, they're not a problem. In that way, they're men going about their daily affairs in the informal northern Nigerian economy. Most Almajiri are like that. Even the young Almajiri are just really helpful around the house. So I said, no, this doesn't present the whole picture. I'm worried about the single story narrative, because if we focus on the single story narrative, then we think that only one solution would do. And then people think in terms of a ban. And I don't think that's the way to go. So I went off and I found men for whom the system has been of value. I found former Almajiri and I asked them questions about their lives and what they liked about the system and what it meant to them. So I could use their stories as a counter narrative. So I could say, no, you cannot make generalizations. The system might have issues and problems, but there are also some redeeming features that we can add on to. And another thing I really wanted to say was that, like I said, there are these dominant discourses about Almajiranci that I felt needed to be challenged because it's a system of representation. And the way you represent something goes on to affect how you treat it. If you call them beggars, if you call them terrorists, then it would be logical that a ban would be the solution. And I didn't think that was the case. So I found three strands of the narrative. One is that Almajiranci is a retrograde system of knowledge. Another is that it ends up producing dysfunctional adults, terrorists, puppets for hire. And then one, which is that it's a child's rights concern, which for me is the most valid. So these are the three narratives. Now, the stories I was hearing from my research participants showed me something completely different. What struck me was their immense sense of self and honor. What we regard in northern Nigeria as someone who was of honor, things we used to recognize before. So I came up with something called an Almajiri character framework. That mark of truth and striving towards something bigger that is recognizable or used to be recognizable. Some of them still had that. And then I also found out that to them, the Malam is the epicenter, the Malam as the locus. When people send their children for Almajiranci, they're not sending their children to a school. They're sending their children to a Malam to teach the child something. So when we come up with solutions that involves building these grand edifices, people are not keen to send their children there because they're not interested in a building. They're interested in a Malam as a particular form of Muslim subjectivity. So that was another thing I found. And I found men who would have 3 or 4 careers. Some of them would be Quranic school teachers, they would be traders, they would be doing so many other things. So for me, that gave them an edge. They were not waiting for anyone to do anything for them. They were trying to survive in a country which had given them so little. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I feel one of my jobs is to tell people to stop and don't believe everything you hear. Yes, it's a very problematic system. But what Almajiranci also does is it tells us a lot about the Northern Nigerian society. It's holding a mirror to our society. Nothing happens in Almajiranci that doesn't happen in the wider Northern Nigeria. If you take away all the beggars from the streets, all the Almajire from the streets of Northern Nigeria, there will still be many beggars on the streets of Northern Nigeria. So for me, that tells us something. I feel like an educationist that we're at crossroads. When we talk of a ban, I keep thinking, you ban and then what? Our whole education system is in crisis. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to design an education system in Northern Nigeria that takes into account our peculiarity. I am Western schooled like many people, and I still regret that I wasn't given access to learning how to read Ajami alongside other things. So I think it's a good opportunity at this stage in Northern Nigeria to redesign the system to take into account all these other things. So the last thing I want to say is in terms of recommendations. I know I was asked to come up with some recommendations, but I would think that there's no magic wand here. Whatever solution has to be slow, it has to be consistent, it's going to be painful because the system didn't get here in a day. So when we think of solutions and we're thinking, oh, we want to do this and we want it to be over by next year, that's not going to happen. It has to be like a 10-year plan and it has to be consistent. Our politicians have to have the will, but it's not only a job for the government. It has to be in conjunction with private organizations. And then we have to revisit policies of the past. So ESPIN's Sangaya project, so many individuals doing fantastic things. I know Sheikh Nuruddin Lemu in Mina, they've got great things that they're doing, FlexiServe. There are different initiatives happening. And one of the things that we're doing with my esteemed brothers, Dr. Bashir Galadanchi and Dr. Usman Bagaji and Haji Arabia Ishaq, is we're coming up with a data bank with a list of every other thing that has happened before us, so that we can take a step and look at what has been done and just draw out their strengths and their weaknesses. Another thing I'd like to say is I'd like to mention my RER approach, which is respect, engage, reform. please, 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 can we step away from this blame, from this name calling of practitioners of Almajiranci? Because I don't think that's helpful. It's a meaning-making issue. As Western school Nigerians, we might not understand the reasons people send, but at the very basic level, we can respect it. And I think that's important. When you come to help someone, you have to come from a place of respect. So respect those involved, engage with them, because the solution will come from them. They need to buy into those solutions and then reform. So if I haven't said it before, I'll say it before I go. I am very, very anti-ban, because I don't see a feasible alternative. No one ever talks about banning Western schooling. So why is it easy for us to say ban this other system of education? So maybe it begs deeper questions of the way we are as Western school Nigerians who can just ditch a system because it doesn't work for us. Thank you very much.
Am I muted? Okay. Thank you very much, Dr.